Hi, it's Easy Ann, and I want to talk to you about eliminating more suffering from your life. Of course, the easiest way is to accept things the way they are and not resist them. And yet there are times that it's better to maybe resist and be authentic. We're divine. We are. We are spirit. And we have a human body, and we have a human experience, and we have all the past filters that make us behave a certain way. I mean, it's not like we're forced to, it's just we're habituated to reacting in certain ways. It's important to know which place we're in. Are we in that expansive divinity? And usually when we're there, we're not even really questioning it. But a lot of times we think we're in that expanded space, and we're not. This is somewhat of an example of that, and that was years ago. I had a car and the heat went out, and I lived further up north in Memphis, and even though some of you might not think that's cold, it was cold to me. And I would get in the car, and I wanted to have a positive attitude, this thing about attitude, and so I would get in my car and I would drive and try to be happy and so forth. But one day, and many times I was, but one day I got in my car and I was freezing. I was so cold. I just went, I don't want to change my attitude. This sucks. I don't like having a cold car. And I just took a deep breath and relaxed. What I was not resisting at that point was I was not resisting the inconvenience, the upset, the physical way that it was affecting me. It didn't mean it was going to ruin my whole life. It just meant that for that moment, I was wanting to get upset about being in the cold. And I could go back to changing my ways. And eventually, of course, I got the car fixed and it was warm again. Thank goodness. We exist all the way from that person, a person who would be upset about being in the cold, to a person that is so expanded that cold wouldn't even bother us. I once went to do a sweat lodge in the mountains in California, and it was very freezing cold, and this particular sweat lodge was done in the nude, and that was when I was very young. I was a lot cuter, so it was okay with me. Everybody was, doing all this. It was a very free time in our culture, and I knew that I had this thing about cold, and I thought, well, how am I going to handle this? And I got out, took my clothes off, and we were walking around outside of the little teepee where we go in where it's really warm, the sweat lodge, and we were walking around on the snow. And so what I did was I decided not to resist it, that I would just really feel what it was like to be in the cold. I walked, and with every foot that I put in the snow, I would be radically present. And I said, I'm going to face this. Being cold has run my life. Like immediately I would get miserable at some points in my life when I was cold. I'm going to face this. And I would put one foot down and another foot down in the cold and be there. And when I was really with the cold, of course it was physically uncomfortable, but when I had no resistance to it, it was really okay. There was some physical discomfort, but because there was no emotional discomfort about it, it was just I had cold feet. So radical acceptance of what is makes our lives easier. This doesn't mean that we don't change our lives, and certainly if I was someone who was trying to I had no shoes, then it would be a different circumstance. I'd work on getting some shoes so I wouldn't freeze. This was a spiritual experiment. It didn't mean that I wanted to go around barefooted all the time. So to accept things doesn't mean that we don't change the future. It means that we cannot, if we try to change what's going on in the present, but just through worrying, being upset, being angry about it, that we'll suffer. That's all it means. It is important to know we can't pretend. I've been with a lot of people who say they're very positive about life, and it's like they're pretend positive. They're not really positive. I'm sure they think they're positive, but it just doesn't reach their lives in a way that I can see it. And it's important that we not fool ourselves into being positive when it's not called for. One time I was helping give a convention, and I was going from one place in this large room to another place, and one of the other people that was working on the committee with me came up to me and she said, "Smile." And I looked at her and I said, "You know, I've spent thousands of dollars in therapy just so that I could feel what I was feeling, and I'm very busy. I'm not really happy right now. I don't feel like smiling." And so I let it go. And so I don't want to try to be a spiritual person. I don't want to try to be a good person. I want to be where I am when I'm there. I want to have the sense of rightness. I can be upset and not spew that on other people, but I certainly can acknowledge it to myself and not try to whitewash over it with a good feeling or an affirmation or a positive thought. Because the positive thought will come. That will come naturally. It really will if we don't resist. So this is my easy idea for the day, and that is be where you are when you're there. Don't put that off on other people, but just let yourself be who you are, feeling what you're feeling when you're feeling it. Once I came home and I've had a feeling of this great expansiveness, and I told my husband, I said, well, I got enlightened this weekend. And it didn't mean the ultimate enlightened, but it certainly means that I was much lighter and I was coming from a different place. And a couple of weeks later, we had an argument. He says, so you're enlightened, right? And I said, yes, this is the way an enlightened person argues. So we can be expanded beings and act in limited ways and still be okay. Our lives don't need to fit any kind of template. They need to be lived spontaneously in the moment with what's going on. We need to live with responsibility, not blame other people, not yell at other people, not be angry with them. We need to be responsible with what it is we're seeing, but we do not need to fit into a defined, perfect kind of behavior. That will make life very hard. This is Ann Sermons Gillis, and I want you to remember that I love you.